Namaste and welcome everyone. Before we start today's program, let's have Waves Kulgeet.
प्रस्तुत है वेव्स कुलगीत।
पुराणों स्मृति ग्रंथों में निहित अमूल्य सार हम जाने, तत्व ज्ञान ही बोध्य हमारा, वेदाध्ययन है लक्ष्य हमारा। दशकों से है वेव्स दे रहा अवसर चर्चा का, चिंतन का।
दशकों से है वेव्स दे रहा अवसर चर्चा का, चिंतन का।
एक मंच पर सबको लाना ध्येय रहा हर सम्मेलन का, वैश्विक हित कर्तव्य हमारा, भाव पूरित जीवन हो, अनृत मार्ग से दूर रहे हम, चिदानंद गंतव्य हमारा, वेदाध्ययन है लक्ष्य हमारा।
वेव्स है माध्यम जिसका न्यारा,
वेदाध्ययन है, वेदाध्ययन है,
That's Waves' journey over the years through its Kulgeet, which is a musical composition of celebration, endless dedication, and synergy of purpose. We are here today for Waves webinar talk number 7. This is a joint initiative by World Association for Vedic Studies USA, also known as Waves International, along with wider Association for Vedic Studies, also known as Waves India. Waves International and Waves India are multidisciplinary academic organizations renowned for providing scholarly forums to facilitate productive discussion and research on Vedic traditions. This WAVES webinar series explores Vedic knowledge through the various scholars and researchers and their thought-provoking writings. On that note, on behalf of WAVES, I, Dr. Aparna Khandelwal, Secretary WAVES India, welcome everyone attending along with our eminent guest of today's program. This program is being chaired by Shri Dhirendra A. Shah ji. He is Director Treasurer of World Association for Vedic Studies, or WAVES International, and Vice Chairman of Federation of Indian American Association of Georgia. We welcome Shri Shah ji. Today's webinar focuses on the theme India's impact on the world from ancient through modern times, exploring the historicity of Indian knowledge systems. The talk on above topic showcases the impact of Indian knowledge systems on the rest of the world, including ancient Egypt, Greece, China, and the Muslim world, the medieval world, and the colonial Europe. The honorable speaker has identified the past pathways in which Indian knowledge system has impacted these civilizations in various periods of time and seeded the growth of modern knowledge systems. For this, our distinguished speaker for today's talk is Dr. Raj Vedam ji. He's a renowned scholar and researcher. He holds a doctoral degree in electrical engineering and has worked in various industries. With several journal and conference papers and patents, he is an innovation leader with strong interest in multiple areas of technology. His current professional interests include optimization, math modeling, artificial intelligence, natural language processing, and machine learning. As a scientist, Dr. Raj Vedam ji research seeks the roots of modern sciences, mathematics, and technology, whereas Western narratives favor the origin of astronomy and math, among other fields, as having originated outside India and imported into India during various invasions. Dr. Raj Vedam ji's multidisciplinary studies using data from several published sources reveal otherwise. His research proposes an ancient Indian civilization that made advances in several fields of knowledge. He believes that an evidence-based narrative of Indian history is urgently needed to correct the grievously distorted identity and history of Indian civilization. Dr. Vedam ji has delivered over 300 talks in India and the USA, offers courses, and has contributed to reviewing and correcting school life history textbooks. He is currently a visiting faculty at Hindu University of America in the USA, Rishi Hood University in India, and Arsh Seva Kendra in Coimbatore, India. In addition, he is also a member of Advisory Council of Dharma Civilization Foundation. So we welcome Dr. Raj Vedam ji. And before that, I just want to inform all the participants here, even joining on our YouTube platform, because this program is going live simultaneously on YouTube platform. Following Dr. Vedam ji's presentation, we will have a QA session, but I request all the participants to be crisp in their questions and related to the talk also, and so that it will be taken up later on by using the raise hand option, or you can use the chat option. I can read out for you for the questions. And now it's time to listen to the talk of today's webinar. So I request and welcome our learned speaker of today. And over to you, Dr. Vedam ji. We welcome you.
Thank you. Namaste. Thank you, Aparna ji. And please do stop me when the time is running out, because I tend to forget about the time. So
Sure.
Please tell me if you can see my screen.
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. Wonderful. Again, welcome everybody. And today there's so much to talk about, so I'm going to go a little faster than I normally do, but hopefully we'll get through this whole thing. So the discussion is going to be on India's impact on the world from very ancient times to modern times. And I maintain that we need to establish the historicity of Indian knowledge systems, something that is not done today, because we talk about Indian knowledge systems. We have a whole lot of experts who talk about Indian knowledge systems, but we are not establishing the historicity, because unless we establish historicity, we cannot have proper crediting of the innovations that are made in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and many other fields. In the absence of this, what we see is that people are going with Babylon or Greece and other places, the source of innovations. So, with that said, what is the key reason for narratives on India that ignore the innovations, right? We are seeing that when the Western historians of science talk about the history of science, India is typically a footnote. It is just a footnote in the history of science where they say, yeah, Indians had a symbol for zero, but that's about it. Figuratively, it is zero. So why such a kind of narrative which flies against the face of evidence? So we are seeing the reason for that is this false narrative of Aryan invasion theory in 1500 BCE, where they say nomads from Central Asia who were illiterate, didn't have a script, only an oral tradition. They destroyed the superior civilization, Harappa that is. And then India was running around with these people in the Ganga plain and so on. And India had to wait for 1,000 years till civilization returned to India in Magadha via the Greeks. After Greek contact, suddenly we got Brahmi script, suddenly we became civilized. And so they say, you've not had enough gestation time for knowledge generation in mathematics, astronomy, medicine. Therefore, if you have advanced knowledge like Surya Siddhanta or like Sushruta Samhita or other such works, you must have copied it from the earlier civilizations like the Babylonians, Greeks, and so on. So this is the kind of narrative that has taken root over there. And people say that Aryans, they brought Sanskrit into India from Central Asia. Brahmi came from Levant, from the Aramaic scripts, we got Brahmi over here. They say that astronomy was taught to us of the Babylonians, and they say that math, sciences, such things came from Greeks into India. The Turkic Muslims, they got us culture, cuisine, architecture, music, civilization. The British taught us science, technology, rational thought, and even Bhakti was taught to us by Saint Thomas, the Didymus, brother of Christ, who landed in Kerala, Muziris. And so these are the kind of narratives that have taken root, and we see there's a criminal distortion of the history of the Indian civilization, all anchor points for chronology, every aspect of Indian knowledge systems and identity. So basically, we're seeing there's a denial of agency, because when Indians try to correct this, there's an attempt to squash them or to pigeonhole them were fascist and all these ideologues and things of this nature. There is no serious attempt to engage and try to understand what's going on. So my methodology, I'm a scientist, so I'm an engineer scientist, and I am interested in the roots of modern sciences, technology, and so on. So we got to go systematically examining the evidence. So I have split this up into several areas. One is there evidence of contact between ancient India and other parts of the world? That is level one. I call it L1. Second, is there evidence that knowledge is transmitted from one region to the other? That is L2, typically India to the outside. Is there evidence that that knowledge system was in use in that foreign culture? That is a higher level of evidence, L3. So we got 3 levels. I'd like to show connections with various geographies in different parts of time. But in doing so, I also like to caution that all data is equally valid. Right? We have some high quality data, some medium quality data, some low quality data. Nevertheless, all pieces of data are relevant. So I try to identify wherever possible about these. And like I said, once we are rid of this incorrect constraint of Aryan invasion, once we just break those shackles and throw those chains away, then suddenly we can reconcile and investigate the deep history of India, the antiquity, and all of these things. So there are several knowledge domains that have been transmitted. These include things like starting with language, the so-called Indo-European language, going on to mathematics, going on to astronomy, medical knowledge, in agriculture, things like crops, methods of agriculture, animals, spices, and things of this nature. Even music, philosophy, and religion has been transmitted out of India. Manufacturing techniques, metallurgy, and textiles, perfumes, and so on. And today, a whole lot of mind sciences, quantum models continue to be exported out of India. Now, this is a different part of the talk. I'm not going to be addressing these things in detail because this is part 2. In order to talk about this, I must first establish the methodology, right? So part 1 is what today is happening. So I'd like to show to you evidence of contact in various parts of the world. So I'd like to start with Mesopotamia. All the way from 3000 BC to much later, through trade, climate-induced migrations, we see that there is contact. And overviews, I'd like to show to you that by 3000 BC itself, Indians had contact with Sumeria, and going on until Neo-Babylon times. And then also in 2000 BCE, following a monsoon failure in India, migrations to the Fertile Crescent, including to Egypt, to northern Iraq, southern Turkey, and so on, the Hittites and Mitannis, and so on. And from the Hittites on to the Minoan culture in Greece in 1500 BC, we got evidence of all of these things. First thing we look is internal evidence. Do we have internal evidence of any such kind of contact? Yes, there is. If we were to take a look at the Rig Veda, for example, in these verses over here, there is reference, for example, he who knows the path of birds flying through the air, abiding in the ocean, knows the course of ships. In ancient days, they didn't have GPS, they didn't have all these kind of devices to figure out where they were in the sea. They would take birds with them in cages. And when they suspect they're close to land, they release a bird and the bird flies towards land and say, aha, land is that side. So the Rig Veda is calling out that particular thing, that you know the course of ships. In one more place in this verse, it's saying that merchants covet out the ocean in vessels on a voyage. So by the time those verses come out, clearly there are already people who are on ships going out and doing trade, the Vaishya classes and so on. One more place, it talks about, it refers to a person rescued in a 100-oared ship. That is giving you an indication in Rig Vedic times that these are not tiny boats, but huge ships that we are talking about. And we have other internal evidence also. In Harappa times, we have trade routes to Babylon and beyond. This is a quality evidence of contact. L1 means contact. And we're seeing from, for example, from Lothal, hugging the coast, people would go to Horn of Africa, to Dilmun and other such places. And here's Elamites, Kassites, and so on, including the land route. We have got evidences with Indus scenes found in these places and all kinds of trade materials found in Mesopotamia. We know there has been contact, pretty high quality evidence is there for that. If we look at the historical contacts in India and Babylon, for example, the paper by Gopal Stavig over here, and this is telling us that in their own accounts, the Babylonians' own accounts, for example, in Babylonica by Berosus, they're referencing people, for example, when they established communities, they migrated from the east by sea, from the Persian Gulf. There is nobody else in this area except the Indians. The immigrants brought a developed civilization, knowledge of agriculture, metalworks, art of writing to that area, including accounts in Genesis that says men migrated from the east or land of Shinar and built a city using burnt bricks, very similar to the Indus Valley accounts. And today there are people who have found out a whole lot of cognates of this old Elamite language, Sumerian languages with the Tamil language, old Tamil language and so on. So very interesting kind of works are present over here. And Gopal also calls out how there are commonalities in Shatapatha Brahmana, Mahabharata, along with Gilgamesh and other accounts. There are some very interesting accounts over there. Recently, in 2022, there's a paper in Nature that brought about some evidences of millets grown in the Sumerian culture. And they wanted to find out in archaeobotany, where did these things come from? And some of the oldest artifacts, 3rd millennium, are in India and places like this. And it apparently has gone through the maritime route. And so these red dots are 1st millennium and has spread in Sumeria. So from the genomics of these millets, we can figure out it's come from India. This at least corroborates the traditional Sumerian account, which says that people from the east have taught us everything. So this is a paper that seems to be supporting that. I call this a high quality evidence with L3, meaning evidence of use of agriculture from India in this place. So very interesting to see Mesopotamian civilizations from an early period of time were influenced by Indians. If we look at the worship, Babylonian worship as reported over here, we are seeing that the worship is almost entirely as it would happen in a Hindu temple. Even today, if you were to go, for example, a Southern Indian temple, you'll find that there's a particular sequence of events over here, choreography, if you will. So there are gods that to be given the food, drink, clothed, unclothed, washed, put to rest, combed, adorned with jewels, applied with makeup, prepared for festivals, carried in processions to other temples, cities, and so on. And there is a very set routine. Start the day slightly before sunrise, waking up the temple, opening the gate, 2 morning meals, afternoon meals, closing of the gate. These are exactly how you'd see worship in Southern Indian temples, for example. So very interesting to see. I call it a medium quality evidence, but L3 shows that there is a practice that is common in these two places. And like I said, in Babylonica, Berosus is indicating a contact between these two areas, and how this person from the East has given them insight into letters, sciences, every kind of art, taught them to construct houses, to found temples, laws, explains principles of geometric knowledge, made them distinguish seeds of the earth, showed them to collect fruit. So it's a low quality evidence, but then it is showing evidence of transfer of that knowledge. And there is one more interesting clay tablet, which is a cuneiform tablet in Babylon, Neo-Babylon at least, in 537 BCE, that is talking about a family of Indian businessmen who were in Nippur called Murassu family. Indians are called Indomaja in this area, and they were typically contract partners, witnesses in business transactions, and all of these kinds of things. So there is evidence of contact. L1 is evidence of contacts, a medium quality kind of evidence over here. And one more look over here, but muslin. Muslin is called a Sindhu. So clearly showing that cotton textiles from India were in use in this part, showing L2, evidence of use of these things. And Jataka tales also, there is a reference to Baveru. Baveru in one of the Jataka tales, again referencing the use of a crow. Typically they take a crow, and that crow, when it flies, it tells them where land is. And this shows a use of that, including the use of the word Baveru, which is Babylon, that shows that there's contact in pretty ancient times between India and this place. And then in India itself, we have one more internal evidence, which is the Dasaragnya, the Battle of the 10 Kings. And there are people who say that after this battle was completed, 10 tribes who were made expelled from this region of Bharat, and they went to the outside of India and settled, and Sudas was the winner and on this side. And there are people who are trying to track them down based on linguistic ideas and so on. This person from compiling works by Srikant Talagiri is trying to show that these various tribes mentioned Rig Veda have landed in all of these kind of places. And this is also called out by Jijit Ravi in his book on rivers of Rig Veda. He's trying to use again the results of Srikant Talagiri and show how after this battle, the Saragnya battle, these tribes have moved out, also accounting for the similarity of the so-called Indo-European languages with Sanskritam. So it shows the Slavic, Baltic, Germanic, Celtic, Italic, all these people are basically out of these migrations. So interesting accounts that people are trying to do. I call this medium quality evidence, but then there is evidence that these languages do exist over here and are used. And it's an interesting way to see it. There is evidence of migrations because of natural disasters. Climatology tells us of several climate events, but we look at the most recent one about 4,200 years ago. There was a 200-year severe drought. That's what this Nature paper is telling us, that monsoon hiatus about 4,200 years ago. Pretty high quality evidence that is telling also that there's contact between India and Mesopotamia, given that people have moved out of India in search of water, and they seem to have gone to the Fertile Crescent. And evidence of this monsoon failure comes from this research paper, for example, 2017. It is talking about how India suffered a massive monsoon failure. So this research paper has used a technology where they're trying to look at oxygen 18 isotope, correlating that with wet periods and dry periods. And they show how for a 200-year interval or longer in 2000 BCE timeframe, India suffered a very, very dry event, one of the highest dry events that you can see over here. So science is also corroborating some of these things. And there's a paper that came out in 2019 in Science, where these researchers say this Indian cattle, this humped bull, is called Bos indicus or zebu. And the zebu, suddenly the prevalence of this animal, at least in the records, fossil records, the bone records, we find that it has gone up in Anatolia suddenly in a period of time. And these researchers who studied that, they're saying that this introgression happened from the Indus Valley 4,200 years ago, thanks to this widespread multi-century drought that was over there. And people here preferred these zebu because they were arid adapted from India. They enhanced the herd survival. So this, in fact, was so welcomed in the tradition that in an Akkadian seal, we are in 2200 BC in the Louvre Museum, we're showing the Indian longhorn buffalo there in addition, showing how welcome some of these things were in that region of the world. And interestingly, we also see the people from Babylon. If you go up over here, we see the Mitanni people, who the elites in Mitanni culture were known to have perhaps a Sanskrit kind of tradition. And this one is showing to us that there are some cuneiform tablets that have been found by the Mitanni ruler, Tushrata. He's written a letter to his contemporary, the Egyptian pharaoh Amenhotep, in 1350 BCE, wherein these peace treaties they're invoking the so-called Aryan gods, referring to Indra, Varuna, the Ashwini twins, and so on. We have treaties over here with the Hatti people, with the Egyptians, and so on. So clearly showing high-quality evidence with that there's some kind of a contact over here. Then going on to medical issues too, there are some evidences that show that even in the medicine, it is only after 2000 BCE, after Indians have landed in this part of the world, suddenly we see the profusion of medical knowledge in this part of the world in various ways. For example, the Nippur Medical Archive, for example, and the Hittites and the Mitannis. There are several evidences that bring these things out. Nevertheless, I call them medium quality, but clear evidence of use of Indian kind of medicine that is there, for the example, in Atharva Veda, origin of Ayurveda. Right from there, there are some techniques and methods we see that are similar also over here. Egyptian medicine, similar to what we saw in Mesopotamia, there is no evidence of Egyptian learning prior to 2000 BC. But after 2000 BC, suddenly we have the Kahun papyrus in 1800, Ebert's papyrus, Smith papyrus, Moscow papyrus. All these things make their appearance after 2000 BC, presumably after the Indians have landed up in these kind of areas. And the kind of things they are practicing is so similar to the contents that you see in Atharva Veda / Ayurvedic practices, later on finding their way to Shishruta Samhita and other Vedas. J.F. Royal, a British here in 1837, in this particular book, he's calling out in these pages how so many plants and materials from India were in use in Egypt, clearly showing that knowledge transfer was happening from India. I call this a medium quality evidence, but still L3, evidence of Indian knowledge in practice in Egypt in an ancient period of time. And this is a Twitter account of somebody who put this a shard. It's a shard that shows what they call an Egyptian acrobat showing a pose. But this is very similar to yoga asana pose that we have. So I just called it a low quality evidence, but L3 shows evidence of practice. There's an Indian knowledge system being in practice over here. Sometimes the quality of evidence is low, but it has got a high relevance in terms of showing a practice. That's why you find this kind of situation. And from their records itself, again, we find this very reference to 432,000 years. Find this, by the way, Neo-Babylon, but we find this in India, the duration of the Chatur Yuga system, where the smallest unit, the Kali Yuga in Surya Siddhanta, is referred to as 432,000. That number seems to be echoed in the Babylonian tradition over here. Additionally, the great year's duration is 10,800 years. Very amazingly, this number too has an echo from India, the Shatapatha Brahmana. There are 10,800 muhurtas in a year. So we are seeing a similar kind of numbers in addition over here. Then there is a medium quality evidence where people are calling out some DNA studies, where some skeletons found in Mesopotamia doing the empty DNA analysis and so on. They've tried to identify that these genes belong to India. We cannot say southern India. I don't think that claim is valid, but it does try to make a correlation that during the trade from India through the Red Sea to these areas, there probably was exchange of genetic material in addition. So it's a pretty low quality one over here. Then this is an interesting fresco that reported in the island of Crete, in the Gnosis Palace. When they restored the frescoes, they found this interesting one showing the Indian langur. So these langurs are endemic to India. And what is it doing in Greece in this ancient period of time? So this is indicative of an L1, that is a contact. So there appears to be culture, trade, intellectual contact, and exchanges in addition in this time frame, 1600 BC, far before the philosopher period when we think contact would have been there. Before that, in Minoan Mycenaean times itself, there appears to have been contact. Then there are a whole lot of stories in the Greek tradition. You take any Greek story, I'll show you a parallel with a Purana story. So I have talked about this at length in several of my stories, including the one in Waves in 2022, 2020. About this in detail, but I call this a medium quality evidence, but showing L2, Indian knowledge having been transferred here and been used in their stories. For example, story of the missing seventh sister, referencing the Kritikas called Pleiades in that culture and why only 6 are visible instead of the 7 sisters referenced to in the text. There's a similarity with the Indian tradition where Markandeya Purana, it talks about the wives of the Saptarishis who became the Kritikas, but one of the Kritikas stayed back with her husband, and that is the Vashishta Arundhati complex. So very similar stories are there in these two traditions. Also, remembrance, ancient remembrance, the Roman historians, they are talking about Indians in the Fertile Crescent. For example, if you see Higgins in this work, Anacalypsis, he's referencing this Eusebius, who's saying that these people have come, referencing the people in Egypt, have come from the river Indus, planting to the south of Egypt, and in a country called Ethiopia, having crossed the Red Sea from Arabia. Herodotus is nations, one in India, other in Egypt. And where did he get that information from? From the Egyptian priests in that time frame. We're talking about 2000 years ago. And so it is much closer to the events at Mazaf. And that's what they're saying here. Philostratus is saying similarly that the gymnosophists of Ethiopia, they're descended from the Brahmins of India. And similarly, so I call this again a medium quality evidence, but there is indication of contact that from India, people have settled over here. That information is over here. So moving on from this entire region, we are going now to ancient Greece, Mediterranean people, 600 BC to 500 BCE, when transmission of astronomy, math, medicine, philosophy has happened, contrary to what Western historians of science say. So, like I said, we have evidence of in 1500 BCE from the Hittites, its knowledge has also already been transmitted to the Greek people, the Minoan people, the Mycenaean people, by their own accounts. Their own accounts, they say that they learned from the Hittites. Then during 500 BC to 200 BC, we have had Greek philosophers who apparently have traveled to India and taken knowledge with them. If you look at the epistemology, the big three in the Greek tradition are Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And Plato wrote a lot, including about his teacher, Aristotle, and so on. So if we look at Plato's work and look at the sources of knowledge, it looks like there's an echo of Vaisheshika over here. He's talking about perception and inference similar to Pratyaksha Anumana. And he's talking about two kinds of perception, external with the sense objects, internal with knowledge of the mind, and how Plato's saying the knowledge through mind is the highest degree of knowledge. This is similar to what Rishi Kanada has already talked about much, much earlier. So we are seeing that all of the schools that arose in the Greek philosopher tradition owe the roots to Socrates at some point. So Indian knowledge has been internalized here and used in the Greek philosophical systems. This is what we see here. And there's a recorded Greek contact too. It is a paper that I wrote in Waves some time back. And it is called out several contacts at the time of Darius, Neo Babylon over here, where, for example, Skylax is supposed to have traveled to the Indus in 509 BCE. Then the Persian general Xerxes, who led an army against Greece in 480 BCE, where divisions of Gandharians and Indians were there. And we have ideas of several Greek thinkers and travelers who have traveled to India. And this is a stele from Persia that shows the Shaka over here, the Hindush over here, the Gandharians over here, Shaka over here. So these are all the different classes of soldiers who took part in the Persian army against Athens in 480 BCE. And there are even arrowheads from that army, which was reported by this archaeologist, Angela. So very interesting. So that yes, contact has been there. So there's a low-level contact, but it's a medium quality evidence. Library of Alexandria. So this is a high quality evidence, and we know that this library was established in this port city over here, Mediterranean port in Egypt. And whenever Mediterranean ships would berth over here, they were required to part with their books for copying in the library. We get it from the authority of Galen over here, who was a Roman physician. He says that all the books that people had, they would be taken to this library, confiscated, and copied, and the original will be kept in the library, and the duplicate will be given back to the people. So the Library of Alexandria accumulated great amounts of knowledge, and so served as a conduit for transmission of knowledge from India into Mediterranean lands. And we know, for example, all the so-called greats of the Greek civilization, Eratosthenes. He was a chief librarian at this Library of Alexandria. And we know that all of these people, Euclid, Archimedes, Eratosthenes, Hipparchus, Theon, Hypatia, Aristarchus, all of them use the resources of this library, showing exposure to Indian thought at this very early time frame itself. So I call this a pretty high quality evidence, and also indication the use of Indian knowledge in the Greek traditions. We have the authority of Clement of Alexandria. He was an early Christian father who lived in 150 current era and so on. And in his early Christian writings, he's talking about how Plato does not deny he procured all that is excellent in philosophy from the barbarians that he admits he came into in Egypt, referencing the Indians as barbarians over here. And the barbarians, there are several other things over here. I'm not going to read all these things, but they're referring to the Brahmins over here, essentially. And several other references on Brahmins have settled in Egypt, and they're transmitting this knowledge to the Greeks and so on. So the Christians call these people pagans and barbarians, and he's referencing it in this particular manner. High quality evidence in contact of Indian knowledge of Indian knowledge in these areas. We have a curious situation where we have a whole host of Greek historians who are talking about India. But curiously, in India, we have almost nobody who's saying that, yes, we know about the Greeks. The one or two exceptions appear to be Varahamira's referencing the astronomy of the Yavanas, and in the south, Manimekalai, that is talking about the Yavana ships that are coming over here. So with those two exceptions, we hardly see any mention of the Greeks in Indian works, but there is great knowledge on the Greeks about India. This is also indicative of Indian knowledge coming in over here. Then we have Pythagoras, who people like Albert Burke, Ian Marlowe, G.R.S. Mead, they all maintain that he went to India, got his knowledge from there, took it back to Greece, went back, became a vegetarian, started a Gurukulam style of school. He believed in transmigration of souls in addition, which is like the reincarnation ideas from India. I call this medium quality evidence, but then it is indicative of transmission and use of that knowledge in this area. Democritus, we have the European traditionists exalt him as the father of modern sciences. But on the authority of Cicero in De Finibus and Strabo in this book, they say that he visited India in his quest for knowledge, and he seems to have internalized Vaisheshika quite amazingly. And whatever he's talking about seems to be the same thing that Rishi Kannada has talked about much earlier. So that evidence is there. It's a medium quality evidence. Nevertheless, it is showing L3, a level of use of Indian knowledge in use in Greek tradition. So that evidence is over here. Then Hippocrates. He's referenced, exalted as the father of medicine. And we are seeing that the system that he brought about in the humor system seems to be an adaptation of the Ayurvedic system, where the Tridosha along the Panchamahabhuta interaction with the world, that kind of system is taken as this yellow bile, blood, phlegm, and this one, hot, dry, cold, all these kinds of things. And there's a lot of similarities in the way he approached treatment, natural treatment, the way it is there in the Ayurvedic texts and other such things. It turns out that he was a student of Democritus. So he's learned from Democritus about these things, and he's basically using this. In addition, exposed to Buddhist transmissions that occurred in this time frame, Indo-Greek contact from Alexander onwards. So there's knowledge of Indian knowledge on medical knowledge having transmitted, not only through Hippocrates and Democritus, but through other mechanisms here in addition. History of trigonometry. So the Western claims that Hipparchus is exalted as the father of trigonometry. And we are seeing what they used, which means Hipparchus or Ptolemy, they made use of chord tables, not trigonometry. Trigonometry is right angle triangles. We are seeing this in Surya Siddhanta. We are seeing this in Aryabhatya. So this is not trigonometry. This is trigonometry. And again, evidence with evidence of Indian knowledge used in that. The next area I'd like to talk to you about is the Indo-Roman trade, where we have knowledge at least from 200 BCE to 400 current era. Indian spices, other things were traded from east coast and west coast of India through the Red Sea, through the land caravan here, and through Alexandria to Mediterranean ports. And this evidence comes to us through this document called Periplus of the Erythraean Sea that is showing to us how Indian knowledge is used in these areas. Again, high quality evidence showing contact at the very least. And today we are finding in a place called Berenike, we are finding Kushan era Brahmi inscriptions. Not a surprise because we know that these are very recent finds in 2024. But we know through Periplus of Erythraean Sea there's already contact. So these are not surprising. Pompeii Lakshmi, this is an ivory statue found in the ruins of Pompeii, originated in Satavahana Empire, indicative of transmission, trade relations, high quality evidence, also indicating contact and so on. Dioscorides is a Greek physician who lived in this time frame. He wrote a 5-volume Materia Medica. It has got a large number of Indian herbs, recipe for drugs. This is used for 16 centuries in Europe. And flipping through some of the books that we have today of Dioscorides, we see several of them are Indian works that are used over here. Arikamedu is a port in Puducherry or Pondicherry, as some people call it. So over here, when I went there several years ago, found this Roman kind of arch over there and the archaeological remains, which is covered up now. And this has been dated around 300 BCE, glass beads in this area. It's again indicative of Roman contact because this port is mentioned in the Periplus of Erythraean Sea. This is something that was issued by the Israel Antiquities on Twitter, showing swatches of cotton cloth that were discarded by the traders on this ancient Silk Road in the Levant, at least 1,300 years ago, showing the quality of workmanship. And they say this is from India. So amazing to see the kind of workmanship and contact. Then we also had the Silk Road, an informal trade network, Southeast Asia, China, India, Arabia, all the way to Central Asia through Mediterranean lands. And the Boer manuscript, a Indian medical text that was found in Xinjiang province and given to a British officer called Boer. That's why they call it Boer manuscript. And the question we ask is, what is knowledge doing on a trade route, clearly indicating that Indian knowledge also was transmitted along with trade in all of these kind of areas. Then we have pre-Islamic Persia, where we already talked about Dioscorides. Then we also know about in Byzantine time, the people called Nestorians were persecuted in the Christian kingdoms, and they fled to Kerala, and they're called Syrian Christians, and they were a source of transmission to Syria. The Nestorians and the philosopher Greeks also fled to Jundishapur from the Byzantine Christianization that era. And that was the center of Indian medicine and learning. And Anushirwan, he sent his vizier and his physician to India to get medical texts for use over here. And these are the ruins over at Jundishapur. A lot of evidence is there about these. These fell into decline after Islamic conquest of Persia. Then we have from India to Armenia, 400 BC to 1800 current era, contact to Syria and Armenia. And evidence comes from various places, including the Jewish accounts that say that even the Old Testament itself, the first Jews landed thousands of years ago, trade missions from court of King Solomon. I call it a low quality evidence. And after Roman Empire captured Jerusalem, destruction of Second Temple, 70 current era, a wave of Jewish immigrants landed in Kerala. They were given asylum by the Kerala king, and they lived in Kerala and Kranganur and other places for a pretty long period of time. Then when Spanish Inquisition was going on in Europe in the 1500s, once again, a whole bunch of people landed up in the west coast of India, Konkan region and others, and they were called Pardesis. And after Israel was set up in 1948, they all moved out and they settled over there. So they were also sources of transmission of knowledge, and through also the Nestorians. The Nestorians who were persecuted as heretical in the Byzantine Empire fled to Persia and to Kerala, and they maintained connection with Edessa. And where is Edessa? This is in Armenia, Syria, the places like Antioch, Nisibis, Edessa, centers of learning over there, part of the Seleucid Empire, Parthian Empire, and so on. And we know that their merchants, Syrian, Armenian merchants, had long trade relations with Kerala, Tamil Nadu, forefront of Indo-Roman trade. They acted as guides for Alexander. So much of knowledge is there about these people. They had Indian theology, philosophy, medicine, all these things were used. And later on in Baghdad, these Indian works that are there in Syria were also translated into Arabic. We know about this too. And one of the evidences comes to us from Severus Sebokht, who was a Syrian bishop who lived in this time frame. He's rebuking the Greeks of his time, saying, don't be so snobbish about your knowledge systems, because if you know about the Hindus, the kind of calculation they have, the kind of methods they have, you'll be astounded, is what he's saying, because it far surpasses anything that you have. So this is evidence that Indian knowledge systems was already in use in Syria in mathematics in that period of time, transmission via the Nestorians onto Syria and so on. So Armenia, I'm not going to read this, but evidence is there from 5th century BC itself that Indians were there. Alexander's army had Armenians who knew how to go to India. They showed him how to go to India. And Thomas Khanna, he was an Armenian trader who sought sanctuary in Malabar, escaping Islamic persecution in 780 current era, and so on. So we have a lot of information about Armenians in India and the use of Indian knowledge over there. Moving on to different medieval period, Islamic, colonial, modern periods. In summary, we can show that after Sindh and Pakistan fell in the time frame of 711 current era through Bin Qasim, we know that a whole lot of Sanskrit works are taken to Baghdad, where they were translated into Persian and to Arabic, Abbasid Empire, and injected into all the Muslim lands. Then later on, when from the year 1000 or so, Indian knowledge directly taken from India and transmitted during Islamic times. Some of the greatest scientists of the Islamic world, Al-Fazari, Al-Kindi, Ibn Sina, they all benefited from Indian knowledge. For example, Al-Fazari translated Brahmagupta's works, Brahmasputa Siddhanta into Arabic, and Surya Siddhanta. Then Manka, who was an Indian physician, Harun al-Rashid's court, he translated Shushruta Samhita. Ibn Sina translated Charaka Samhita, and so on. So we are seeing that Indian works translated into Arabic and Persian were injected into all these Islamic areas of the Abbasid Empire, whether it is Persia, Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, all the way to Morocco and to southern Spain. Southern Spain, Cordoba was a capital, and there too, Indian via Arabic into these areas. Then we see Baghdad House of Wisdom set in the time of Harun al-Rashid. And this was a translation school where Greek and Indian works and Syriac works were translated into Arabic and patronized by many Arabic scholars. They were the greatest scientists of that time, Al-Hayatham and places, people like that, making use of these works and advancing the course of science prior to Europe taking this knowledge. They were the ones advancing it. And this was destroyed in the Mongol invasion in 1258. However, this famous name, Al-Tusi, he rescued many of these manuscripts and took it to Azerbaijan. And he is an important figure in the conduit of Indian knowledge and sciences to the West in mathematics and so on. Then we also know from 1000 to 1700s, many Indian works were taken. For example, Tughlaq, who plundered Nagarkot, he got a library of 1300 Sanskrit books translated into Persian and so on. So we also, Dara Shikoh, the unfortunate younger brother of Aurangzeb, he was an Indophile and he had translated many Upanishads and Indian works, 50 of them, into Persian. The French got their idea of Vedanta for the second time through Dara Shikoh's translations. People like Voltaire and others, they got their understanding of Indian works through the translations of Dara Shikoh's Persian to French and so on. So very interesting to see this kind of a transmission in this time frame. Then we have evidence from Muslims outside of India, how they're using. Al-Burani, of course, came to India. We know about his works, but people like Al-Tamim in Tunisia were talking about it, about Indian numbers, and many others. I'm not going to, but there's evidence of them. Not only the Muslim people, even medieval Europe, all the way through colonial era, they were also getting this knowledge. So this knowledge is spread from India through the Muslims 700 to 1700, and from these Arabic works injected into Sicily. Sicily was under the control of Muslims, so this knowledge is available there, including in Spain, in Cordoba, and from Spain in north, the control of Christians in that time frame. And in Toledo, there's a cathedral whose only job was to translate these Arabic texts into Latin, first into Castilian, Castilian into Latin. So these were diffused into Europe from the year 1000 to 1600. All over Europe, this diffusion happened. Diffusion also happened from Arabic, from Muslim lands into medieval Europe. And that evidence is there in people like Isidorus of Seville, in Leonardo of Pisa, there's Alexander de Well, there's Rabbi over here, and others who are talking about Indian numbers. And they have got this knowledge from the Muslims. And they're talking about that. Gerbert of he became the Pope later, and he also had an abacus where he was trying to use Indian kind of computation to do that instead of using Roman numerals and so on. And Leonardo Fibonacci, right, had a trading post in Algeria, and he went with him as a young boy and talking to Muslim merchants. Hindu number systems. And in 1202, he wrote this book, Liber Abaci, talking about how Indian numbers could be used and so on. So, summary, Indian knowledge has gone to the Greeks and Romans in an ancient period of time. But when the Roman Empire was Christianized, all this knowledge is destroyed as pagan and it is gone. But some of that knowledge survived in places like Lebanon, Beirut, all these kind of places. These were inherited when it became Islamic. So the Muslim people inherited these works. They also destructively got knowledge from India. All this knowledge was consolidated and injected into Europe. So from Sanskrit to Arabic injection schools in Toledo, as well as in Sicily, from 10th century to 13th century. And today this knowledge has come back to us without any citation and so on. And evidence for this comes through Toledo. We know about this Raymond of Toledo, who started the translation efforts over here with teams of madrasa teachers, Jewish scholars, monks from Castilian to Latin. Gerard of Cremona, who translated 87 Arabic texts to Latin in these works. I've taken a look at some of the books that he translated. In that are Indian works which were translated from Sanskrit to Arabic, and he's translated that here. So we know how some of these works landed up over here, including the famous Alphonsine astronomy tables, how they were set up with ideas that have come from ancient India. And including in Italy, like I said, Sicily was also under the control of Muslims. And there too, we have evidence of transmission of Indian knowledge from Arabic into Latin and so on. This is something the British Library released about 2 or 3 years ago, showing that here is a 12th century book that we have, showing how British surgeons were advanced in medicine in an ancient period of time. So they released this ancient illustrated book. And this was amusing to me because it's clear evidence that Indian knowledge, Shushruta Samhita, has gone from India to Baghdad to Spain, from southern Spain to northern Spain, diffused into Europe, gone into Britain. And there the doctors are talking about hemorrhoid surgery, nasal growth surgery, cataract surgery. These are all Shushruta's procedures, and that has been talked about over here. So there's evidence of Shushruta's knowledge being used here. History of numbers, again, we know a whole lot of ideas about how these numbers were diffused to Europe, whether it is from this work by 3 monks, Gerbert of Aurillac or Leonardo Fibonacci. But none of these things became popular until the German called Adam Ries in 1522. He wrote a book, meaning the accountants of his European era, telling them how to use positional mathematics and decimal usage, showing how much superior it is to Latin numerals. And he time and printing press was already there. So his book was printed overnight. It became a sensation in Europe. And overnight, Europe chucked out the Latin numerals and started using what we today call the Hindu numerals, but there they call it Arabic numerals, unfortunately. So anyway, so we see echo in pre-colonial British kingdom. So in 1556, this book called Castle of Knowledge, Robert Record, this is showing a scholar-master dialogue where the master is showing how to cube a number 5541 by itself 3 times, multiplying by shift and add kind of mechanism. At first, in Britain, this is routine knowledge in India for thousands of years. And mind you, this is just 100 years before Newton. 100 years after this is Newton. So you can imagine how quickly this knowledge has gone there. Then we also have from Europe, low quality evidence transfer of knowledge in this time frame, and 1400s when colonization has started. I've given an example of transmission from Aryabhatta to Copernicus, but it's too elaborate to talk. I don't think we have the time to do that. And how, when leading to events, so-called renaissance of flowering of European thought, many of the European scholars hid their sources. So we have the spectacle of Europe coming out of dark ages, out of illiteracy, out of the control of church, and with disease and other things. Suddenly people are coming out with new ideas, new other such things, and we are told flowering of European thought. But really speaking, they have been having a critical mass of Indian knowledge accumulated from 10th century onwards till a point they can talk about it. They hid their sources because after Spanish Inquisition, any Muslim work was seen as seeking knowledge from Satan, inviting savage retribution. Several things: condemnation of Paris, Roman Inquisition, Spanish Inquisition. So these people have hid their sources and passed off Indian knowledge as their own original work. That's why we call them plagiarizing at this point. Colonial era, we have a whole lot of evidence. For example, the Portuguese, who had many fleets coming to India, including Portuguese scientists who had come to India. Then information on books they've collected, the Dutch in Tranquebar, the Portuguese in Goa, the French in Tamil Nadu, the British, all collected. I've got bibliographies of books they've collected and translated. And evidence is there in some of the translations. Garcia de Ota, who wrote this work on Ayurveda, it is translated in Latin by Clusius. Hendrik van Reed on Ayurveda, once again on botany and medical works. And so a whole lot of evidence exists that even in colonial times, they were taking Indian works and translating it into British works. And right now we're talking about Yukti Bhasha, which is also a Malayalam compendium of works from the Kerala school that apparently has been transmitted through the Syrian Christian Church, according to C.K. Raju. And this has been used much before Newton's already there. Not only towards India, also eastwards, we have information in the Silk Road, Buddhist trade circuit. We have evidence of knowledge transmission. Cannabis is used as a medicine in ancient China. It is also mentioned in this Ebers papyrus in Egypt, as well as Dioscorides is using it as a painkiller. But this is there in Ayurveda. This is there in cannabis sativa grows in India, for that matter. So evidence of these kinds of things. Travelers from China, Fa Hian, for example, or Huensang, or Yi Jing, so who have taken knowledge, gone back to China. Also, Indians who went from India, settled in China, they got Chinese names today, so we don't even recognize these names. But some names like Kumarajiva, or this Pallava prince Bodhidharma, or Dignaga, Vajrabodhi, who went from India and settled in China and took a lot of Indian knowledge also. We have evidence of these things, including contact. For example, in Guangzhou, there is a Hindu temple, even today, serving at the time when the Chola Empire had contact, serving the traders at that period. We have knowledge of Hindu kingdoms, Southeast Asia, from 50 current era at least, going to 600 current era over here. A whole host of them are there, including going all the way. Till this area became Islamized and later on Christianized, we are seeing that Hindu kingdoms were in this area. So in summary, what I hope I've shown to you is that in every period of time, in every geography of the old world, we can show that there is evidence for transmission, L1, which is contact, L2, transmission, L3, use of Indian knowledge in that civilization. We can show all three in different periods of time in different civilizations. So this map is a summary of all of what I've talked to you in this very brief seminar. I've not talked to you about the specifics of what was transmitted. That goes with knowledge domain that I talked about earlier. That really is another 1 hour seminar at least, and that will talk to you about that. So I've shown to you prior to 3000 BC, I didn't talk to you about this, but 3000 BC to 2000 BC from Harappa, from monsoon failure, Greek travelers, after Alexander contact, Roman trade, Silk Road, medieval trade, Arabs, the Muslim trade, colonial era to China, and to the present day going on through quantum theories and other such things where mind sciences are used and so on. So my higher level concluding remarks is that the deep history of India that is taught in our schools and universities is criminally wrong, and we have to change this. And in my talks, I've shown 5 agencies controlling this historiography with their ideologies and frameworks: colonial, Eurocentric, missionary, socialist, and the Marxist. I have shown strong evidence to uphold the antiquity of the Indian civilization through multidisciplinary evidence. There is no invasion migration, and we can show antiquity. We have a well-developed epistemology showing very great antiquity. We have well-developed mathematics, astronomy, medicine with citation trial in addition. And I've shown to you in today's talk this brief thing, how Indian knowledge seeded ancient to modern world in all of these places. And we have none of this is acknowledged in the history of sciences or books, and urgently we need revision. Okay, with that, I think I won't step my time. I will stop over here and turn it back to Aparna ji or whoever is controlling this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. And that was really very enlightening with lots of information about the history, basically mainly made that reveals to our culture and deep-rooted culture and the language perspective. And now the session is open for the questions, because I haven't said much because it is already, we have spoken so much, and I know there may be some few questions regarding that. And there is one question in the chat as well. But before we take that, I invite Professor Lalan Prasad sir for his question.
Please unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself. Professor Ji, please unmute yourself. You're muted.
Please unmute, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Raj Vedam. You have very nicely elaborated India's connectivity with the Western world in ancient India. I was also looking for if you could say something about India's connectivity with the eastern part of the world, say Indonesia, Thailand, and Cambodia, and other countries. And apart from China, of course, which you have elaborated, there have been connectivity of India around the whole world, I should say, from east to west and from north to south, with different countries at different stages of history. But one thing which has been very common as a student of economics, which I have observed, is that India's trade relations have been with the most part of the world in ancient India, with the Western countries as well as with the Eastern countries in the world. And there are enough evidence to show, right from Rig Veda, which mentions about the shipping and about the type of ships which used to be manufactured, and they used to sail to different parts of the world, to the Mughal period and so on. And I should say that up to 17th century, India was an economic superpower. It was a superpower, of course, economic superpower at the time of Vikramaditya, at the time of Chandragupta Maurya, and other emperors, Hindu emperors. But even in Mughal period, in Akbar's time, India's economy was very flourishing, and it has trade relations with the most part of the world. Till 17th century, India was an economic power, if not a superpower. It was only after the Britishers came that the things have deteriorated. So will you kindly elaborate a little more about India's connectivity with the eastern part of the world also?
Sure. So I in the last few slides, I try to add that I address the West primarily because they are controlling the narration of history of sciences. So in their books, so much distortion is. So I expended great effort looking westwards and saying this is what it is. Eastwards, there is no dispute, even in the West, that India has impacted all countries to the east of India through the Buddhist circuit, and even earlier we impacted. We have knowledge of, for example, astronomy, how the Chinese nakshatras are exactly the same as Indian nakshatras. There was a period of time when Indians had 28 nakshatras, right, with Abhijit in it. So we have the Chinese lunar stations. They also have 28 lunar stations, 1:1 correspondence is there. So that is their knowledge of medicine, like I showed, knowledge of mathematics. So China is a known story through the Silk Road as well as through the Buddhist trade circuit. Now, you also talked about Southeast Asia. That too, we have evidence right from the later period. Later period means the Chola Empire. From the time of the Cholas, we know that they had huge maritime navies that were controlling the seas, not only the Bay of Bengal, including the Malacca Strait, going all the way up to China. China did not have a naval fleet in the year 1000, 2000, till the Ming dynasty came in 1300. So it was the Cholas who were ruling the seas over there. And we know that they had conquered some countries of Sumatra, Indonesia, and places like that. And the impact was there. That's why in Bali, we're still seeing Hindus there. But even before the Cholas, the Mauryas had contact with Southeast Asia. That evidence is also there. So, including if you go to some of our epics are talking, for example, about eastern part of India. We, for example, in Mahabharata Itihasa, it is said that Karna's domain was Anga and Vanga. But is Anga and Vanga what we identify today with Bengal and places like that, or could it be far beyond that in addition? So there are some intriguing questions that come when we see that, for example, in Vietnam, we are finding some river names that are so similar to the river names in India and places like that. And even the Mekong and things like that, we see very similar to Indian kind of etymology shows Indian origin. So the eastern part, I think there's no dispute West that contact has been there through the Buddhist circuit, that is one, through trade and through conquest through the Cholas, that is two, and even prior to that through the Hindu contact frame and earlier, there is evidence of contact. I think there is no dispute that all the way to Japan, Korea, and others. In fact, the Koreans have got their own national legend. It's not proven by history, but they say the Korean people have come through the union of a princess and a Korean prince. And it is their descendants who are the modern Korean people. This is the legend which they have. But then people are studying languages, they're trying to show some kind of cognate of connection between, for example, the Japanese and the later Indian languages and so on. I'm trying to recollect in my mind, yes, the Brahmi script. So I'm talking the script, not the language, the Brahmi script itself. How the Brahmic script has gone to Japan and other places. Some people presumed went through China, but now there is ideas that has gone through the sea route. From southern part, it has gotten to Japan. So a lot of information is available. I have not talked about this in detail because that's not under dispute. And regarding the second part of your observation that yes, India was a superpower. For example, Angus Madison has shown in his historical economies of the world that India had 33% of the world GDP 2000 years ago by his estimate, falling. The slope is 10% fall in 1,000 years' time. And by the time the British came to India, we have fallen from 24% of the world GDP, we fell to less than 4% at the time of independence. British impoverished India. I've spoken at length about this in my talks. So please take a look at that. So I have also shown in my talks that the downfall of Indian civilization happened with the British. Even during the Mughal times, Muslim times, there was great attacks on Indian civilization, but not complete destruction. It is the British people who caused the complete alienation of Indians from their traditional knowledge systems.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for this answer. And now the another question is from Akula Pushanji. He said, when was Devanagari started and why we wrote scriptures after BCE?
Okay. So interesting. So Devanagari, we have to see the history of scripts. The history of scripts, obviously, everything the British touched, they distorted. So all Indian scripts come from Brahmi. So Brahmi is the ancestor script from which all the modern day Indian scripts have been derived from. Where did Brahmi come from? That was the issue. So there are colonial people like Bhula and others who presumed that from Phoenician script. Phoenician script gave rise to Brahmi scripts on this side, on the other side to other European scripts and so on. But then the evidence does not support that. It's done by Indic scholars like Professor Subhash Kagji and others who had tried to see how the Harappa script could have evolved into the Brahmi script. For example, in a work that he did, they saw the frequency of the most used Harappa signs, the top 10 most used Harappa signs, and the top 10 Brahmi signs. And there's almost a one-to-one correspondence in the shape of the signs and what is being used. And there are also people like S.R. Rao who have found in Bet Dwaraka what he refers to as a transitive Indus script, transitioning from Indus to Harappa to Brahmi. So these kind of a transitive script in 1500 BC, of course, a claim, but he's referenced it in that manner. So there is evidence that in India, from Harappa script, it might have evolved into Brahmi. From Brahmi, we know all the other scripts, including Devanagari, has come from that route. Then the second part of the question was, why did we start writing scriptures after BCE?
After BC.
That is not perhaps that can be supported very easily, because we must see what are the mediums that were used for writing by the Indians, right? So we know that, for example, Babylonians used cuneiform clay tablets. In clay, they could bake those tablets. It persists for thousands of years, no problem. The Egyptians used papyrus. Even papyrus can, if it is preserved in dry records, it can stay for a long time. Indians use very perishable media, things like palm leaves, things like cotton cloth. These are the kind of things Indians are writing on. So these have not survived over time. The average life of a palm leaf is about 400 years to 500 years. That's why they had to be copied and recopied and so on. But intriguingly, very intriguingly, Megasthenes, who was a Greek traveler to India, he left his work called Indica. In that, fragments of that work survive. In that, he's saying in the Mauryan kingdom, there were signposts. There are signposts and mileposts showing how to go. Let's consider that for a minute. When he's traveling on the roads over there, he's seeing milepost and a signpost saying how to go. Why would that be there unless the population was literate enough to understand the signposts and all these kind of things? So clearly script was there even in the BC period, we're talking about 300 BC period. If you look at Yajnavalkya, he's referencing writing that is taking place and things like that. If you look at Buddhist records, they're referencing how Buddha knew all these scripts. From Brahmi script, that script, this script, he knew all these scripts and what he would write. So scripts imply writing, right? So writing is taking place. So I don't think the assertion that Indian works written in BC, after BC period is supportable. I think works existed much, much before in written form also, but they're not persistent. We have had copies and citations of earlier works. For example, in astronomy, we have Aryabhatta. Aryabhatta in Aryabhatya is saying, nothing that I've done is new. I have merely taken the works of Brahma Siddhanta, and what is the word here is Brahma Siddhanta. We don't have Brahma Siddhanta, but he's saying this is what it is, and all the mathematics. And Aryabhatta was around 400, 500 current era. So he's talking about works that came much, much before him. So there's evidence that things are written much, much earlier. They're not survived.
Ji. Next question is by Satyavani ji, and she said, how do we explain the vernacular birth? Why did they happen? For
the vernacular birth. Okay. So I'm not an expert in this aspect of it, but many other experts who try to talk about this say how from Sanskritam we have got the Prakrit, the various Prakrits that have come about. And from Prakrits we have the languages that we know today, the classical languages of India. If today, it may shock many of you, I can speak Kannada and Tamil fairly fluently, but if you were to remove from Hindi, if you were to remove all the Urdu words out and keep the original Sanskritam words, I can understand Hindi fairly well because there's no difference in Kannada, literally no difference. The words that you use for different jargon is the same in Kannada as well as in Hindi that does not have Urdu in it. So what we are saying is that all over India, we seem to have a common grammar. For example, the Sandhi of Sanskritam, that is similar, whether it's in Kannada, whether it's in Marathi, whether it's in different languages, the same thing. The script we already talked, it's common everywhere, including several stories and philosophies. We have everything is common that we see over here. And now that I'm telling you, even the words that we use, if we remove out all the Urdu from Hindi, it is understandable even by a Tamil speaker, even by a Kannada speaker. We can understand Hindi. So I think the so-called vernacular birth is an organic growth of Prakrit into these various forms that we see today. And evidence is there in the deep substratum that we have Sanskritam in every one of these things.
Ji. Next question is by Dr. Jayanti Sahuji. She said, when we do a comparative study, many things we may find similar, but many things are different. How do you see this when you compare Greek philosophy with Indian philosophy?
Good question. Very
And
good
she
question.
also complimented that highly informative lecture.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a good question. So, yes, we do not expect a one-on-one persisting in their works and over here. For example, Plato in his work Timaeus, he's referencing the one, how the one exists, and when he says the one, he's referencing to Brahman. Basically, it is Brahman. Just like in Nasadiya Sukta, we have got the one existed, breathing windlessly and surviving with no day, no light, all these kind of things. Similar ideas are there in the Greek traditions also. In fact, there are people who have written comparative Indian philosophy and Greek philosophy who are trying to show that there are differences, trying to identify the differences. We expect, yes, there will be differences because the Greeks evolved several schools of thought, just like we had darshanas, various schools, whether it's Rishi Kapila or Rishi Kanada or others, we have got various darshanas, which have evolved different slight ideas on pramanas, what pramanas we'll use for knowledge and these kind of things. Similarly, in the Greek tradition, we have got the Stoic people and various other categories of knowledge. So we expect there'll be divergences as their own intellectual input feeds into their philosophies. I'm not claiming there's a one-to-one copying over here. What I'm saying is that Indian knowledge has seeded the knowledge in these civilizations, and they have taken it forward. Just like the Muslims, they copied a lot from India. They learned a lot from India. All the mathematics, astronomy they learned, but they didn't keep it stagnant. Their scientists have taken it forward. Al-Haytham is a name who has taken many things forward. Just like that, it is not as if Indian IQ was the best in the world, others didn't have IQ. No, IQ is uniformly distributed throughout the world. So it's only that Indian civilization is so ancient, we have had the opportunity to face problems of humanity or curiosity, and we have addressed some issues far earlier than other civilizations have had a chance to do that. And these transmission mechanisms have taken these ideas there. And these other civilizations have taken these ideas and gone further with it. That evidence is also there. So I'm not claiming that that the Greek philosophy is exactly the same as Indian philosophy. And to give you just a couple of more ideas. So initially we call Platoism. Platoism is where we're talking about 400 BC, Plato and his ideas and so on. So by the time we come to this Hellenic period and so on, we find that even these ideas have become a little classical. So we find a new field called Neoplatoism. Neoplatoism has come. And the person who founded Neoplatoism is a person called Plotinus. Plotinus was a student of somebody called Ammonius Saka. Ammonius Saka, the name Shaka should tell us that he's from India. He's a yogi who settled in Greece, and then he's reconciled Plato's ideas of Vedanta, and he's taught it to student Plotinus. And Plotinus has got about this new field called Neoplatoism. And this Neoplatoism has found its way into Christianity in addition. So there are DNA of Indian thought in many of these places. Don't go looking for an exact matching even today. You will not find it. You'll find ideas going half the way and stopping there, and then something else taking place over there.
Gee, and another question is by Dr. Shashi Tiwari ma'am only. If she wants to ask, she can ask. Ma'am,
I'm reading.
please.
Yes, go ahead.
Firstly, I will like to congratulate Dr. Raj Vedam ji for a very nice presentation. And I wrote question 2 times, but it was not successful. Writing, I don't know what mistake was there. So my question was that it is very true that from the over in ancient period, people were coming from different countries as a pilgrimage or as a traveler or as a knowledge seeker in India. There are Jatakathas, there are other evidences in Bodh literature. So, but on the quoting Manu Smriti, can we say that it was not transfer of knowledge, but it was teaching knowledge? As Manu Smriti has said, एतद्देश प्रसूतस्य सकाशात् अग्रजन्मना स्वस्वचरित्रं शिक्षेरन् पृथिव्यां सर्वमानवा. The persons who are born in this country, in our country, India, they will teach to the people of the other countries going there or any other way. They will teach, they have to teach. And that is the reason India is called Vishwa Guru.
Right.
It is a guru, and as guru used to give knowledge to others, so India is from the very beginning giving knowledge to others. And Manusmriti is their evidence, literary evidence in this. So it was not the transfer of knowledge, but it was teaching them our knowledge from the very
Right.
beginning. And you
Right.
explain this, please.
Very true. Very true. Yes.
Even one comment from Dr. Mosmi Chattopadhyay ji, she said, I agree with you, sir. In Kadambari of Banbhatta, we find the citizen knew different languages or upbhashas in that time.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
that was the comment, and she's here with us even. Do you want to say anything, Dr. Mosmi ji?
You're on mute, so please unmute yourself. You're on mute.
You are on mute.
I agree with you, sir.
Thank you.
It's a very interesting talk.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes, your
Thank
observation is
you.
right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Your observation is right that yes, there were clearly several ideas over there. In southern India, we find that languages had more or less coalesced into one. We are finding that if you look at old Telugu, old Kannada, old Tamil, we are finding that there is the sharp distinctions we see today are not even there. In fact, Malayalam too is a recent language according to this evolution of languages. So people, yes, knew on the base of Sanskritam, we could get by in many regions, but regional divergences had already taken place.
Ji. And another hand raise is from the Trupti ji. So I invite Trupti ji for her question.
Yeah, thank you. Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
you're
yes.
audible. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for really informative session. My question here is that I'm in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm here for 20 years and I grew up and I studied in India. There is no question or doubt about India's contribution in many different fields. The question comes when we have to defend our younger kids here who are going to college, who are going to school over here. And as you said, the history they learn, it's not very accurate. So what should be in our toolkit? Is this information will be sometime available in terms of book with some kind of resources on your website that we can share like in more engaging way?
Yes, it's a question you raised in several talks that I give. Yes, there's a book that I'm writing. It will not be ready anytime soon because the material is so vast and voluminous, and the amount of diligence to do to get the facts right over here. So, but there are a lot of people who are working on these issues of correcting the textbooks and so on. Many efforts are underway. So I suggest you hook up with one of the groups that is doing this if you have concern in Texas, for example, about the textbooks and so on. So right now, I'm working on reviewing the new NCERT books in addition to try to see the issues over there. So there are people who are doing this all over. Hopefully, with time, things will change. But you as a parent can teach your children authentic knowledge. Today, it's available in books, YouTube, and places like that by thought leaders. So perhaps make it a habit in your house to watch these talks by thought leaders and discuss this on Saturdays, perhaps after streaming on Saturdays after a movie. Watch a serious documentary by one of the thought leaders and try to discuss it in your house. So this way, a habit of discussing issues in history, and hopefully your children will start learning authentic knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, please go ahead, Dhiruji.
Yes, Dhiru sir, I like to invite you even for the question and as well as for your comments.
Well, my
For your
comments are
chairperson.
particularly knowing Rajji very well. He's an excellent research professor and he has done an excellent job. and we appreciate for what he has been trying to do, educate people about our culture, about heritage, and the knowledge that we have accumulated over thousands of years. My question to you, Raji, is that as you know that in the Western world, there's a lot of Hindu phobia taking place, right from the universities like Harvard to Stanford to anywhere. And unfortunately, I think we have not been able to do much to counter this propaganda, though we have been trying. And just give you an example that last week we had a Guru Purnima celebration, and we invited several teachers from various schools here in Atlanta, and I've showed them what was Guru Parampara. And there was a very good lecture thrown by Sahana Singh ji. As you know, that he's going to be your a partner in that. And I think that is the way to go about. It's just active. By just lecturing, people are not going to listen. The young generation do not read. Young generations want to know knowledge, how it is come through.
Right.
So that was the first time we have tried it. We are also working in to change the curriculum of books in at least in the Georgia counties. Eventually, I think it should spread to everywhere. And I think your knowledge probably would be better used if it is done in a video type of a thing that people, small young children can look at it. That's my thank you. Thank you. And I appreciate. We look forward to seeing you in Orlando very soon.
Yes,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much, Zero G, for those wonderful comments. So, yes, I concur with your observations. And just about 10 days back, no, last week, I was in Maryland for 7 days addressing a Hindu camp by VHPA, where I was talking to high school children as well as young college kids about the Bharatiya civilization. Many of them were first generation and second generation Indian American kids. So it is difficult for them to appreciate why they should learn about distortions in the Bharatiya civilization. They are so removed from it. So why should they even learn that? It's a challenge for me also to frame it in a certain way. But eventually, the notion of identity is what I was highlighting. My first few, I gave 11 lectures. In the first few lectures, I highlighted identity and said, wherever you go, whether you like it or not, people will identify you with the Bharatiya civilization, and they will use whatever Hindu phobic ideas they have to label you as a casteist, what inverted quotes or whatever nonsense is on their mind. So one should have knowledge about these things to counter these things. I
Sure.
think that message was well received by the students, and we had a very fruitful discussions on identity. We talked the Cisco case, for example, and several
Sure.
other things. So I think children, when we show them how it is going to impact them. In fact, one of the lines I told them was that you have two parts to your identity. One is what you have cultivated with your family connections, with your knowledge and who you are. You're bringing that to the world. But there's another part of your identity that's your civilization strength. If you don't know your civilization strength, you are leaving that on the table. If you knew that strength, then that is part of who you are. You can project yourself more powerfully on the world stage. So I've emphasized that in addition to them. Also, to contemporize Sanatan Dharma, I also told them why Sanatan Dharma alone has the solution to world problems, whether it is climate change or other such things. Dharmic messages help us to navigate this world without any paradoxes or issues that Abrahamic systems have. We don't have those paradoxes. So it helps us to navigate. So I've tried to emphasize these ideas that you need to be an ambassador of this because it helps you to understand your identity and perhaps in the future solve the world problems.
Don't you think that parents should know more about their dharma? And because I think I found it one thing that most of the Hindu parents, I'm saying most, they have very little knowledge about what dharma means. Their knowledge basically is the Hindu temple variety of knowledge. Go to the
Right.
temple, pray to God, put some prasad, and then ask God, give me this. That's all the
Yes,
knowledge
yes.
they have.
It's a
So
transactional
today's
knowledge.
children are
Yes.
not going to accept that,
Right.
And
Right.
unfortunately, that's what we are coming across. We are trying to educate, but you can take a horse to drink water, but you can't force. So unfortunately, that part of it, but we got to go on trying. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Last tip, and I'll stop after that. My recommendation to parents has always been on Saturdays, make it a habit in your house. If you guys like to have family time watching a Netflix show or Amazon Prime, by all means do. After that, have about half an hour or 1 hour, watch a thought leader like Chinmayananda ji or somebody else. Watch an English lecture or by Raja Malhotraji or somebody else, Subhashkar. Watch these and discuss in your family about these things. Do it week after week, and eventually a culture of this imbibing Indian knowledge will come in the family. So one as parents have to consciously do this, and we'll see a change happening. Otherwise, the alienation is too great from what Sanatan Dharma is and where our young parents or even old parents are in this. Okay, I'll stop over there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. Okay, Aparnaji, I think that's it, isn't it? Raj
Yes,
Vedam
sir.
ji.
I think
Excellent lecture,
Rajesh, sir,
excellent. Excellent question answer.
one comment is here in the Rajesh Jhaji has just written that excellent questions. Please let the recording link to come in so that it can be shared extensively. We have already shared that in the chat box here. And also I request Adarshi to again put that in the chat box so that people can access it later. And also all our videos are there, well posted on the Waves blog YouTube channel. Please, Adarshi, post the address here. And with this, we have excellent question answer session to the talk, and the talk was also very excellent with so much information about history and our historical culture and other things, other comparative studies, we can say. And basically, as being students, we sometimes feel that history is a very boring subject. But with Dr. Raj Vedam ji's lecture, it turned out very interesting. So because none of us has left the meeting even while the talk is going on and even after that. So that was the observation to made. And with this, we have we are going to conclude this talk here. And you all know now September is here, and we are going to meet most of you in our International Waves conference that is based on Vedic studies only, and that going to organize in Orlando on 13 to 15 September. So I hope we all will meet there in person or even through online sessions we are going to have, and we will go
And
into
I have to give, yes, I have to give an information. On the second day, there will be panel discussion, and Dr. Raj Vedam will be doing that as a panel chief. And the topic will be distortions in history, I think. Is it?
Yes, and in our education system, yes. Yes.
That is again going to very interesting.
And very, very enlightening persons are contributing there as a panelist. Dr. Subhashkar, Dr. Sana Singh, and Kundan Singh. All are related to history and distortions also.
Yes. And like history panels, there will be another panels also related to Ayurveda or some other interesting topics of the Vedas. We are going to explore many subtitles there related to Vedic studies.
3 panel discussions. So one will be Ayurveda on Ayurveda, the second history, and the first will be on Arth Chanakya Arthashastra. So Raj Vedam ji, can you promise that after every 6 months you will be here with us in the webinar?
I'll be honored if you invite me. I'll be honored. It'll be my pleasure. So please, I'll be very happy to.
Aparna, please note, every year he will be invited after 6 months. No, very knowledgeable and very interesting. No one left the laptop or a computer and whatever it was.
Yeah, one more comment is there that Namaste everybody. This is for the first time I am attending this group meet program, and he's Ramesh ji is here with us, and he's from Karnataka. He actually liked this program, and we keep on. This is our talk 7 of this year, Waves webinar talk series. We have started in the month of March 2024. So this will continue. Let's see how much we can continue this, and with all your support and all your interest, we are going to make it live every month. So thank you everyone, and with this, Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschat Dukh Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. See you in talk number 8 next September, coming September. Thank you very much.
Thank you.